Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by David Wolman, and only David Wolman today, just a two-man show for this one. David, you and I both obviously very Super Bowled out from last night, that scintillating performance by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Kansas City Chiefs. So as we now try to come down from that high, we have the high school girls basketball playoffs on the docket and at center stage this week. The action gets going on Thursday, the first of 7 rounds. We for the most part, know what the field's going to look like. We still have a few loose ends to tie up with, Mesquite Horn still is playing for the rights to the top seed in District 10 6A. You got Newman Smith over in Carrollton. They're playing Woodrow Wilson to see who's going to be the top seed out of 11 5A. So again, we'll know the full playoff field and what all the first round matchups are on, I guess, after Tuesday. But for now, we at least have the overwhelming majority of the field has been set. So we have enough information where we can go ahead and just preview this sucker, talk a little bit about who's in the playoffs, what is in store for this opening round this week, and just maybe discuss a few teams that might be hanging around for a little while. So let's get right to it. As a quick aside, the postseason structure is a little bit different than previous years. It's kind of similar to how volleyball was constructed during the fall. You have there's no regional tournaments, so you don't have the grind of regional semis on Friday, and then the teams turn right around and play the following day on Saturday. The state tournament is not really a tournament. It's just going to be the state finals that take place out in San Antonio. The state semifinals will take place at separate neutral sites, depending on the teams that advance that far. So, it's nevertheless, though, we still have plenty of local representation in the postseason, as we always do. So let's talk about the teams that made it, and let's just see what is in store in the weeks to come. We can start over in Class 5A, talking about a team that actually hung around for quite a bit last season, and that was Lake Dallas. Lake Dallas had quite the postseason run last year, their longest ever, going to the regional semifinals, a historic postseason on all accounts, and they've done nothing but build off of that and look every bit the part of one of the better teams in the area. They're fresh off a district championship. Did they go undefeated?
14-0.
There you go, an undefeated district championship. After last year, they split the district title, but obviously, it's the postseason landscape changes every year as far as the teams you got to go through to get where you ultimately want to go. So as far as Lake Dallas, though, it's a team that obviously has high expectations. So just talk about those expectations, David. And how is what's the mood around Lake Dallas right now as the Lady Falcons get rolling later this week?
Well, the mood's very confident. Yeah. This is a very confident group. I mean, this is a team that, even though they're still kind of a young team, that like the majority of the this team is juniors. Like this is it's a veteran savvy team. Mm-hmm. Obviously, last year, like when you went all the way to the regional semifinals for the first time since 2008, like you did lose a couple of seniors off that team. Dorian Norris, who is now playing at Texas A&M Commerce, and Josephine Elliott, who was a district MVP last year, who's now playing at UT Tyler. Like those are two important pieces, but the people who were like the sophomores last year, like Georgia Elliott and Cameron Richardson, who's actually a freshman last year, and also Allie Buchanan and several other players, like they got like all that experience last year, to see what it's like to be in a postseason environment. Mm-hmm. And now that they got that experience, and you couple it with Mackenzie Buss, who's coming off like a season-long injury last year with a ACL injury, like just imagine what this team can do this postseason.
I know. Granted, it's not going to be easy because that's a tough region that they are in. And I always like to do this experiment at the start of the postseason, is kind of go through and see how many teams from each region finished the year state ranked. And now, granted, again, obvious disclaimer that state rankings are by no means the end-all, be-all, and whatnot. And especially a year like this, with as up and down as it's been because of the pandemic, because of kids being in and out of lineups due to quarantines and whatnot. And it's been a little bit of a chaotic year. So again, these rankings might be a little bit loose as far as what they actually mean, but if you are strictly looking at what it says, at least according to what the Texas Association of Basketball Coaches has in their most recent state poll as of this morning, Region 1 has 4 teams that rank in the state's top 10 currently. You've got Wichita Falls Rider. They're 21-2 on the season. They're ranked number 4 in the state. Then you have Mansfield Legacy at number 7, Lubbock Cooper at number 8, and Amarillo, always a powerhouse. Mm-hmm. They're at number 10. Lake Dallas, though, not too far off, though. They're number 14 in the state. And then all the way down to number 14, you have El Paso Chapin. So Yeah, obviously it's to get to where you want to go, you're probably going to have to beat a few heavyweights along the way. But obviously it's a team that has plenty of experience from what they accomplished last season. And then, yeah, obviously you mentioned with what Bus has brought to the table as far as being able to make up for lost time with just an incredible junior season.
Yeah.
It's a team that certainly has some skins on the wall, and obviously looks to be hanging around in this thing for quite some time.
And this is a team that, obviously you mentioned Bus, and she's just, she's so athletic. She gets to the basket. She can make opponents slide 4 feet onto the floor when she does a behind the back crossover, like in that game against Grapevine that clinched the district title about a week and a half ago. But it's also the way she drives to the basket, which creates looks for her teammates too, and she's got some great teammates as well too who can knock down shots. You got junior Georgia Elliott, who's Josephine's younger sister out there, and the first time they played Grapevine this year, that was a game where she scored 29 points, and they won 69-66 in overtime against a Grapevine team who hadn't lost a district game, and maybe it was their second loss of the season right there. And then obviously you got Allie Buchanan, who's a force in the paint right there, and then a sophomore Cameron Richardson. She's had some double-digit games as well too. So it's not just Bus. You just can't focus on her because they got some other girls who can knock down some shots on this team.
And then let's see, then pivoting over then to Region II-5A, we got a lot of matchups locally over in Region 2. Just going to kind of quick hit some brief thoughts on each one that we have. Let's see. Then you have Frisco Memorial and in Princeton. Memorial's an interesting team. I'm just anxious to see what this team does because last year was. Is that your phone ringing?
I don't know what that is. It's somebody texted me. They can wait.
Let's see. Memorial last year it was a bit of a breakout for Memorial last season, and I believe they entered as the number 2 seed out of that Frisco district, and then they actually got upset in the first round by Denison, despite the promise that Memorial showed. They had a tough time finding that requisite gear in the postseason and actually wound up losing that game by double digits. A bit of a surprising exit for the Lady Warriors. So they get rolling. They're once again, I believe, the number 2 seed out of 9-5A, but it's not going to come easy because they got a tough one against Princeton, who was the number 3 seed out of 10-5A. Princeton was actually state ranked for portions of the season. I don't believe they are anymore, but nevertheless, though, it's a team that went 21-4. Their only losses were to McKinney North and Wiley East, the top 2 teams in that district. They're led by a double-double machine in Riley Cave. So on paper, Memorial has the talent edge with especially led by Jasmine Lott, a district MVP contender. So just anxious to see though if this is now the year when Memorial gets over the playoff hump, because this is at least Princeton on paper is a tougher matchup than what this team had to go through last season. So curious to see what that means for Frisco Memorial. We did mention though that Newman Smith and Woodrow Wilson have some stuff to sort out in 11-5A. I'm kind of curious. I'm fascinated to see how that matchup on Tuesday shakes out between those two as far as who gets the top seed. Just because when you look at the first 2 meetings during district between those 2 teams, they split the series obviously, and then both games materialized in the exact same fashion, and they were double-digit blowouts in favor of one team. And then you add in the additional subplot that in the game that Newman Smith lost, they didn't have their best player. Jada Shipp, and then Woodrow Wilson didn't have its best player in the rematch just a couple weeks ago. So hopefully they're both at full strength and we can finally figure out who the better team is between these two, because when you factor in just those absences in the lineup, it's really tough to take away a whole lot from those 2 regular season meetings. So we'll see there. As far as who wins that game, the winner of that gets Adamson in the first round. The loser would draw Spruce. Either team will be favored in those 2 matchups. And then the question is then once you get past that juncture, you're likely going to run into somebody from that Frisco district, and we'll see what that means. Newman Smith built a lot of experience and momentum last season, winning a playoff game for the first time under Jason Samuels, and then Frisco Centeno just cracked them pretty good in the area around. So you're hoping with a lot of those kids back and the role that they've been on over the back half of the season, despite not having played with their full complement of players yet, that maybe this year's a little bit different as far as being able to offer up a bit more of a competitive showing against whoever they get between 9-5A and 10-5A, assuming they are able to get past whoever that team out of 12-5A is in the first round. Then looking elsewhere, man, this is right at the top of as far as some of the most intriguing first-round matchups, at least in our coverage area. McKinney North versus Frisco Liberty. Now, this is a McKinney North team that, as of last week, was ranked number 20 in the state. They lost in double overtime to Wiley East in a game that was, going to be for a potential split for the district title. Great game. North fought back from a 10-point deficit. Their defense was just outstanding in the second half. They actually had chances to win this game at the end of both regulation and the first overtime, but couldn't convert either chance. And then the Wiley East finally took command there in that second overtime and wound up kind of winning this thing, going away by 8 points. But it's North has been one of the more interesting stories all season because of, as we've mentioned on the podcast, they've got a few freshmen that have taken on massive roles on varsity, with Caitlin Hamilton, Ciara Harris, Cheyenne Wooten, and now all of a sudden you have to begin your first playoff run against the defending state champions. Who, you talk about, a team that has been just so incredibly consistent as this Liberty team has been over the years. Obviously, it all starts and finishes with the state title that they won last year. But even beforehand, this program was about as impressive as it got in terms of just consistent playoff success. So the last time that Liberty lost in the first round was in 2012. Since then, they've gone at least 3 rounds deep every year. So that's 8 years. They've gone at least 3 rounds deep each of those 8 years. They made 5 appearances in at least the regional finals. They made 3 appearances at the state tournament. It's just, how many schools in the state can even say that they've had that sort of consistency over the last 8 years? It's not a long list at all, I'd imagine. And Liberty, they're just, they've got a lot of experience back from that team that won state. Their record was a little bit tough to read into because they were, a little bit more up and down early in the season when Jazzy Owens-Barnett was out with that Achilles injury. And, it's a team that's going to impose a style on McKinney North that I just don't think the Lady Bulldogs have seen just yet, as far as a team that's going to grind this game to a halt and just fundamental you to death and just basically make it to where you're just not going to have as many possessions against this team as you normally would. So it's a heck of a test for McKinney North right out of the chute, and I'm curious to see what this means as far as Liberty, despite a bit of an up and down, regular season, being able to maybe shift gears and do what they've done so many times and just get hot and see where it takes them. Despite being the 3 seed out of that district. But I think that could be a great game. I think there's some sneaky potential in Wiley East against Frisco Centennial as well. Wiley East is a tough matchup. I saw them against North, and that team just has so much size. Obviously starting in the paint with Akasha Davis, who's right at the forefront as far as district MVP over in that district. They had a freshman in that game. Let's see, what was her name? I can't even remember her name. They had a little freshman, a Lier, something, but she was really, really impressive against McKinney North as well. They've just got so many bodies that they can put in the paint that just make it so hard to score inside there. But they're playing a Centennial team that went 3 rounds deep last year. They were right on the cusp of knocking off Liberty, and they've got 2 seniors in Madison Ott and Layla Patel that are, that's about as strong a 1-2 punch as it gets in girls basketball in the 5A Metroplex. And it's 2 players that have been through the fires of playoff competition, and just if they can at least neutralize or at least try to not get absolutely ravaged on the boards by Wiley East, because in that game, McKinney North's not a big team, and they paid for it. Akasha Davis finished, I believe she had 21 points and 21 rebounds in that game. Just so much just dominance in the paint and just controlling the glass. And if they can at least limit the damage in that respect, then, Centennial's got a chance, despite this being a 1 versus 4. Centennial doesn't feel like a typical 4 seed just because that's a really good district that the coming from. So, just curious to see if there is any upset potential in this one, despite Wiley East being state ranked and whatnot. Frisco Lone Star was able to win that district there over in 9-5A. They come into this thing red hot. Again, if you survive that Frisco district with only, I believe, just 1 loss on your record, then that's saying something. They do get a first-year varsity program in Rock Hill. And you know what? Shout out to Rock Hill, man. Despite being just in their first year of varsity athletics, they had a strong cross-country season, and then they've made the playoffs in volleyball, girls basketball, and boys basketball is already qualified too.
Think about Prosper ISD this year.
Oh, yeah.
Both the girls, the boys at Prosper High School, and then Rock Hill, both their girls and basketball programs qualify in the same season. So great season so far for Prosper ISD.
I know. And then, now Prosper's just, they're just doing great things on all fronts. I mean, the football team had its run to get all the way back to the, the regional finals, and, volleyball had another strong run. And it's, what a year. And even for the upstart Rock Hill School, despite all these programs being in their first year of varsity athletics, to just immediately hit the ground running like this. Now, granted, Lone Star is going to be a tall order.
Yep.
And Lone Star, when you look at them, I'm just anxious to see what this means as far as, like, if you look at the recent success of Frisco ISD and the girls basketball playoffs, and how you've had Liberty and Lone Star both make it to the regional tournament each of the past 3 seasons. And it's just those two have been kind of the bell cows for as strong as Frisco ISD has been in girls basketball. Those two have kind of been the benchmarks. Anxious to see what this means as far as if they can repeat that success or whatnot, because obviously it's going to be a challenging region. But nevertheless, so history does at least forecast that we might have a couple Frisco teams making pretty deep runs here. So, that's kind of a look in a nutshell as far as what Region 2 has. As far as like who the on paper favorite is, at least according to rankings, this is actually a district where you didn't have anybody from Region 2 ranked in the top 10. The highest ranked team is actually Wiley East. They're number 12. And you also have, Lone Star at number 17, McKinney North at number 20. You have Midlothian 18, Red Oak 19. So, a lot of teams whose resumes are kind of closely, at least close by comparison. So again, ultimately doesn't know what that means. Any one team is head and shoulders above the other, because like I said, Wiley East is the highest ranked team, but I could see them going right down to the wire with Frisco Centennial potentially in that first round matchup. So we'll see what it all means, but I'll look at Region 2 over in 6A. Let's then talk at least a little bit about Region 2 over in 6A with Sachse, with Mesquite Horn. David, obviously Horn still has some business to settle as far as what their seed's going to be with Tyler Legacy. Those two teams play tonight at Maybank to determine the 1 seed out of 10 6A. I'll cede the reins over to you. Talk a little bit about what is at least on the docket for Horn and Sachse as the postseason gets rolling.
Well, for Horn, tonight is going to be a fantastic matchup. Both of those teams, their combined record between Tyler Legacy and Mesquite Horn on this season is 45-6.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and both teams are 10-2 in district play. So this is going to be a fantastic game. I think this is a game that's definitely going to go down to the wire right here. They played each other twice already. The first 2 games were really close. Legacy got the better of Horn on New Year's Eve by a score of 48-44. But a few weeks later, on January 26th, Horn rallied from a 3-point halftime deficit to take down the Lady Raiders by 10 points. And in that game, Jasmine Shavers, who I believe is committed to Mississippi State.
That's a good question. I don't have that information in front of me.
Yeah, Jasmine Shavers, she's absolute stud for him. She had 21 points in the second matchup for that game. So Division I, caliber prospect right there. So it's going to be an exciting game tonight. But whoever wins that district title, they'll get a pretty favorable first round matchup. But then when you get to the second round of that particular region right there, they're either going to face DeSoto or Duncanville.
That's really kind of the lingering question for everybody in Region 2 6A is, okay, well, how long until you have to play either Duncanville or DeSoto?
Yeah.
Or I believe, number 2 and number 3 in the state. With Horn, I guess, no matter what their path is, they're going to, if they get out of the first round, that is, they would run into one of those 2 schools, I believe. Let's see. If they win, then if they win their first round matchup, if they were to win tonight and if they get the 1 seed out of 10 6A, then a first round victory would then get them Duncanville in the second round. If they are the 2nd seed out of 10 6A, a win in the first round would pair them against DeSoto in the second round. So there's really no easy draw. I mean, you can say what you will. I know DeSoto technically has beat Duncanville twice, but that doesn't mean that Duncanville is any more favorable a draw on paper. So it's they'll need all the Jasmine Shavers that they can put out there. She'll have to be at her absolute best to keep them afloat for much longer than the second round.
And now, just moving on to Sachse, they finished second in their district right there, and like we just mentioned, DeSoto and Duncanville, if they get to the third round, they could to see if we play Duncanville in the third round.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just the D word right there, DeSoto or Duncanville. Wow. So, I mean, it's actually just, just like Duncanville, they're a model of consistency as well, too.
Absolutely.
This is their 10th straight playoff appearance right here. And they've come into the playoffs on a pretty nice little run right here. They've won I went on Max Preps. They've won 5 straight games. They're 11-7 on this season, and they're going to play Rockwall, who is the 3rd seed out of District 10 6A in the first round. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that'll be a good matchup right there to kind of see what Sachse's all about. And Saxe, I kind of like the role that, like I said, that they're on right now. One of the particular games I kind of noted, that just to show how good of a role they're on right now, they've had 2 matchups against Wiley this year, and the first time that they played Wiley, they lost by 5 points, 44-39 on the January 20th. But a couple weeks later, on February 2nd, they turned right around and beat them by 16 points.
Okay.
So, I mean, I like the role that Saxe's on right now.
Yeah, that's a program that still got 3 rounds deep last season there. I mean, yeah, if you're looking for without the state championship or whatnot, but a team that has been on a similar role like a Liberty as far as a team that is always getting at least 3 deep in the playoffs, It does feel like Saxe has really kind of had a nice thing going there over in Region 2 for some time. It's going to be a bit of a tricky road, though, because, as you mentioned, though, if they do win that first round, then you're likely looking at a second-round matchup against state-ranked Harker Heights, which went 3 rounds deep last season. And then if you're able to score an upset there, then you likely get DeSoto in the third round. And that just won't be fun for anybody involved. So it's again, like I said, I wonder if you were to put like betting odds as far as the likelihood of a certain matchup, just what the odds would be at anything other than a Duncanville DeSoto regional final out of this, because it feels like those two have been, with the exception of your I guess let's see, the number 1 ranked team in the state. Let's see, who is it? It is, Cypress Creek. That's right. Cypress Creek's undefeated, over in Region 3. But, yeah, I mean, Duncanville and DeSoto have been kind of head and shoulders, a combined record of, 43-3 entering last week. So, yeah, that's those 2 programs are in quite the good way. So, we'll see if anybody can upset the apple cart and do, deny that regional final. But it does feel like those 2 teams are kind of a cut above the rest of the field right now. Mm-hmm. All right, so then let's round this out then with a look at Region 1 and what we have shaken out there over in 6A. We obviously got a handful of local teams with the 5-6A versus 6-6A by-district matchups. Some quick notes on those. Allen versus Lewisville in the first round. Allen enters as the 2 seed out of 5-6A. They draw Lewisville, the 3 seed out of 6-6A. They did play earlier in the season on November 9th. Allen won that game just 38-34, and that didn't feel like a fluke, just given how these teams have traditionally matched up over the years. So obviously Allen was in Region 2, these last 2 years. But beforehand, though, in 2018 and 2017, Allen and Lewisville played each other in the first round of the postseason in each of those years. And both games went right down to the wire. In 2018, Allen won the matchup 55-51, and then in 2017, Lewisville won 37-35. So history says that these 2 teams tend to play some very, very competitive basketball, and I get it just looking at the personnel on paper and just the defensive problems that Lewisville can at least pose for a team like Allen, which even though Allen is state ranked and has just 4 losses all season, Lewisville does have some pretty stout interior defense with Layla Lawrence, who's one of the few players that you could throw her on Mackenzie Worm. Allen's 6'3" post, and you can feel all right about that matchup. Layla Lawrence was the co-defensive player of the year in last year in 6-6A for a reason. And then they have some other really, really quality defenders. Maya Dotson, just a sophomore, and I think that there's at least a recipe there for them to at least give Allen some problems. Now, anxious to see if Lewisville can figure its offense back out. They did lose last Friday to Hebron in a game that Hebron just kind of kept them at bay. Lewisville just could not find the bottom of the net over the last half of that fourth quarter, and Hebron winds up winning that one, going away. So, but like I said, history does kind of favor this matchup being pretty competitive, despite the disparity in rankings between these two. So, anxious to see if we get more of the same on Thursday when they match up. Plano versus Braswell is another one that could be sneaky decent, given what Braswell has accomplished in recent years as sort of a program that's been steadily getting better with each year. Obviously, they had an awesome season in their last year in 5A, and then they finished 3rd in that district this year, only behind state-ranked Allen and Geyer. Plano, a team that's kind of... It feels like they're maybe flying under the radar a little bit. which is insane when you consider that they're returning the majority of a rotation that went to the regional finals last season, obviously led by, Michaela Edens and Amaya Brannon. Plus Plano's coming into this matchup in a pretty good way. They've won 7 of their last 8 games after being a little bit up and down for the first half of district play. They were just at one point only, I believe, 4-3 over the first half of district. And some of that had to do with, with quarantines and kids being in and out of the rotation. So it seems like they've at least figured out a far more consistent product in recent weeks, so we'll see if that translates to the postseason. It's another team that's been really, really successful in recent years, obviously winning state in 2018, and then they went 3 rounds deep in 2019, and then obviously 5 rounds deep last year. So obviously the bar pretty high for Plano as they get their postseason rolling. Ditto for Plano East as they draw Prosper in the 1 versus 4 matchup. With the 6-6A champs taking on the 4 seed out of 5-6A. It's a rematch between 2 rivals from District 9-6A last year. East won both meetings last year, and obviously the personnel has changed a little bit on Prosper since then. East pretty much has its same team, but I think back to that first meeting last year on the road at Prosper, where East wins that game 48-39, but it was a really competitive game most of the way. This was like a 2-4 point game right up until the very end, and East got some separation at the free throw line. And I just remember, just in terms of just sheer talent, East had a fairly overwhelming advantage, but Prosper just hung tough behind just scheme and just fundamentals, and they were just so sound, and it was at least enough to at least give themselves a puncher's chance in that matchup. Now we'll see if they can replicate that at all on Thursday, because this is not the East team that they saw last season. Personnel wise, it looks the same, but in terms of just mentality and just the confidence that this team is playing with after having run the table in District 6-6A, it's a program that is certainly fancies itself, doing a bit better than going 2 rounds deep from what it did last year. East is a team I'm anxious to see what they can do with the year that they've had. Their only losses all season have been to Duncanville, DeSoto, and South Grand Prairie, who are all ranked in the state's top 5. So it's a team that at least on paper, and they've kind of they got through the hardships of that stretch of close games that they were having to pull out. They've been far more convincing to close out the season. So let's now you just got to see what it translates to in the playoffs and having to carry yourselves as a team that now expects to start winning postseason games and whatnot. So yes, Plano East and Prosper, that's one to watch on Thursday. And then you have Hebron versus Denton Geyer. Hebron, like I mentioned, despite being the 4 seed in 6-6A, they got a huge win Friday against Lewisville. Their defense was outstanding down the stretch, and they've got at least the personnel just from an athletic profile, a lot of size and range with their wings that maybe they could at least make things a little bit difficult on Geyer, who looked just so emphatic in being able to just tear through Allen in that rematch that they had a couple weeks ago. Bella Earl, Evie Getz, Haley Mason. It's just a question of just how Hebron is going to be able to handle that pressure that Geyer is going to put on you, and just that press that they throw, and just the job that they do creating turnovers and getting points through that. And it's it's going to be a tall order for Hebron. It's just going to come down to how well you protect the basketball, and if you cannot just get completely scrambled by that press early on, then we'll see. Maybe it's a game. But obviously, yes, Geyer, a team that's going to be one to watch for this postseason. Kind of like over in Region 2, the big question is how long until you run into those 2 teams from District, I believe, 8-6A with South Grand Prairie, who I believe is ranked, let me pull it up here. Are they number 5 in the state? They're number 4, actually. Yeah, number 4 South Grand Prairie and number 5 Arlington Martin, both in Region 1. And it's going to be, if Allen and Geyer both advance, then they would get those 2 teams in the second round. I believe. So if Allen is the 2 seed, so then that means they would see SGP in the second round most likely, and then with Geyer, it means they would likely see Arlington Martin. So you could be getting 2 matchups between teams that are ranked in, I guess, the top 15 in the state in the second round alone. So yeah, you talk about some overqualified matchups potentially early on.
Yeah.
It's at least if you're Plano and Plano East, though, it's a nice little reprieve there, and that you likely wouldn't see either of those teams until the third round, assuming you're able to advance that far.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where the strength of this region lies, is with those 2 8-6A programs. But we'll see if 6-6A or 5-6A has anything to say about that.
I think it's possible.
Yeah, it all gets going on Thursday with the bi-district round. Schedule is very, very heavy towards Thursday games this week as the playoffs get going. So, plenty of fun hoops in store as the show gets going. So, quickly before we close out, though, let's just kind of some quick notes as far as some things to watch for this week on the boys' side of things. Obviously, the focus will be on the girls' side, but still plenty to decide, though, with the boys entering their final week of the regular season for the most part. So, David, what are a couple things to watch on your end for this week?
Well, I'm going to watch the Colony boys basketball team. Them and Sherman are battling for the number 4 spot out of 10-5A. And the Colony holds a 1-game lead going into tomorrow's games. Like the worst case that the Colony can do is cause a playing game to happen.
Okay.
That would have to happen if they lose to Rock Hill and if Sherman somehow beats McKinney North.
Okay.
But even if the Colony loses and Sherman loses, then the Colony will get in the playoffs. But obviously the Colony would just like to just take care of business, regardless.
For sure.
They're going to play a Rock Hill team who's in its first year, but still going to make the playoffs.
Oh yeah,
that's what accomplishment.
They were state ranked earlier in the season.
Yeah, they were. What an accomplishment for that team.
It's a good team.
So those two teams, they went down to the wire on January the 30th, and Rock Hill won 57-56. But for the Cougars during that time, that's actually the 4th game and 4th nights that they were playing since their return from a quarantine. So with some games ever since then, and a little bit of couple of days between games, you're kind of interested to kind of see how the Colony kind of handles it this time around. So I mean, it'll be a great game tomorrow night. And then just moving over to 6A, Capel, they're in quarantine until the end of this week. So they have to reschedule 3 games. Flower Mound, they're going to replay. They were supposed to play them on Friday, but it's going to be rescheduled for this Saturday at a time to be determined. I saw Max Prep, so I think it's 11, but I just want to double check just to verify. And then next week they have games on Monday and Tuesday. Monday they're going to play at Plano, and then close out the regular season against Plano West on next Tuesday, the 16th. And obviously it's going to be interesting to kind of see how they come back from the quarantine. I think this is at least the second time that they've had to miss games because of a quarantine.
Goodness.
Yeah, but I mean, Capel's a team that's won 12 straight games, and they hold a 1-game lead over Marcus, in District 6A. So this district's going to come down to the wire, and then Marcus has got 2 games remaining left in district play. They got Flower Mound, who they lost to Flower Mound 30-28.
Yeah. I'm sure that thought is not lost on Marcus as they get ready for Tuesday.
Just a little bit of motivation right there, and then they close out the regular season Friday against Plano. So that district's come right down to the wire.
Yeah, kind of just a quick note on that, though. Yeah, obviously Capel in first place, they're 10-1. Marcus, half game back, 10-2 in second place. And then, I mean, it's just, I have no idea with 1 week to go who's going to get those last 2 playoff spots. You have Plano and Lewisville are tied at 6-6 for third place, and then Plano East and Hebron are 1 game back, tied for 5th place at 5-7. You look at the schedules this week. Obviously, the big game that jumps out is Tuesday. Plano East and Hebron play at East. Now, East won the first matchup in the game that went right down to the wire, so huge game for both fronts. If Hebron kind of needs this one if they're going to be able to hang tight, because you can't surrender the head-to-head tiebreaker with East and then still be able to, I guess, find a path to the postseason, even though East still has to play Lewisville later in the week. So a huge game for Hebron in that respect. Plano has a really, really tough week. Obviously, they don't have to play Capel until Monday or whatever, but they get a little bit of a break and they draw Marcus on Friday, but they're closing out the season against the top 2 teams in the district, which is obviously that's very tough.
Very, very tough.
Yes. See, with Lewisville, though, their draw is probably, at least on paper, maybe the easiest. I don't know. It's tough to say. I mean, they get Plano West, to start on Tuesday. Plano West, which actually, upset the apple cart in a little bit. They actually upset Plano last week on Friday to kind of now put Plano's playoff hopes back into jeopardy. With this tough week. That was we talked about last week. Was Plano had to get through that. They had Flower Mound on Tuesday and West on Friday, the bottom 2 teams in the district. If they could get through that in one piece, then they'd be in better shape. But they split those 2, so now all of a sudden it's no longer as much of a clear-cut, shot as it appeared. So, nevertheless, Lewisville plays West on Tuesday, and then they get East on Friday. So obviously Lewisville and Plano East, a very, very big game later on this week. So, like I said, I don't know right now if I was to put odds on it who gets those last 2 spots, because it just feels like there's so many matchups that could go either way. As crazy as this district has been, it would be foolhardy to say any one team has a decided edge over the other, regardless of the matchup. And then the last note is I'm anxious to finally get to see this team in person. I've been wanting to, and just the schedule just hadn't worked out. But got to finally check in on the old Lovejoy on Tuesday. See the Lovejoy boys as they look to wrap up what I think was a pretty unexpected district title. Would be. I mean, I guess I'd have to go through and see the TABC and where they had them projected. But Lovejoy, they were in quarantine for a little bit and had to play a quick stretch of games. But they've emerged from this playing their best basketball of the season. Mm-hmm. They've won 10 straight, and they've really taken command of what was an otherwise a really closely contested district title race over in 10-5A with McKinney North. We just mentioned Rock Hill as well. Obviously Mitchell Weaver, Carson Holden. They've done a really good job, keeping things on track for them. And I mean, they were able to sweep Rock Hill, and they split with McKinney North. So North is still a game back in the standings, so that does mean that Lovejoy has to win Tuesday against Wiley East to wrap up that district title outright. And, they won the first meeting pretty convincingly, and, we'll see what's in store on Tuesday. But yes, Lovejoy in a very good way heading into the playoffs. And, David, that's looking at it all, man. Preview for the girls' basketball playoffs, some quick hits on some notable stuff on the boys' side, and that will do it for this episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. Through technical difficulties and all, we are finally at the end of the road. So, yes, folks, postseason gets going later this week, so wherever you wind up on Thursday, hey, until then, folks, we will talk to you all later. Enjoy the rest of your week.